So let's unleash the savage fury of the Hunters of Russ, with a look at two spectacularly vicious Space Wolf lists, with some good success cutting their way through 40k 9th edition. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today we're returning to Fenris and taking a look at two fairly different Space Wolf tournament lists. We'll talk over the units and choices that have been selected, and hopefully sharing a little bit of inspiration for those trying to lead the Sons of Russ to victory on the tabletop. The first of the two lists I had the pleasure of being absolutely brutally beaten by at the hands of Jaime Paris, who took first with it at the Warp Wanderers Invitational RTT. What really struck me about it as I was playing it was just how well coordinated it could be on the advance, things hiding and being protected turn 1, and then the characters buffing both the shooting and assault elements in the future turns, delivering some fairly hideous amounts of damage exactly where it needed, while completing the mission and holding the secondary objectives all at the same time. The list uses the combination of Whirlwind of Rage and Born Heroes, the tried and tested successor combination that I think most of the time is kind of flatly superior to the standard Space Wolf chapter tactic. You both get +1 to hit on the charge and exploding 6s as well, and you still have the option to heroic intervene for 1 CP on the unit where it matters the most. If you're not wanting to run special characters, then I would trade out your standard chapter tactics for this. In combination with Savage Fury, 6s to hit will generally generate 3 attacks all at once, making the melee units thoroughly lethal. As it goes for Space Wolves, the list is really quite a balanced one. Some troops for objectives, a trio of dreadnoughts delivering some firepower, some utterly murderous Wolf Guard with jump packs, a drop pod of point and delete Longfangs, and a trio of souped up characters to get the most out of these overlapping threats. First up for the battlefield we have the dreadnoughts and the troops. The dreadnoughts are 2 Redemptor dreadnoughts with macroplasma incinerators and onslaught Gatling cannons, and a standard issue relic Contemptor dreadnought with the twin Volkite culverins. Lots alike, solid firepower, can do Wisdom of the Ancients for some reroll 1s to hit, and work very nicely with the buffing characters. Troops-wise, we have 2 units of 5 Bloodclaws and 1 unit of Incursors. The Incursors can cheaply threaten midfield objectives nice and early, fairly tough to shift with transhuman physiology and their smoke bombs, and even threaten a little in melee if they're needed, and the Bloodclaws are just a dirt cheap way of holding backfield objectives, can try and stay completely out of line of sight if they need to, and if the enemy moves up to try and push them off, they've got a fair amount of countercharge threat with a bunch of attacks. Having a decent investment in troops means that he can either focus solely on the mission, dominating those objectives, raising banners, or doing other actions, if there's enough of a concern that the main thrust of the attack isn't going to be able to take out the opponent's army. Then, raging out ahead of them, we have 3 units of 5 Wolf Guard with jump packs, Storm Shield and Lightning Claws, a fairly standard setup by now, and extra good for the Space Wolves as they get them at 2 points cheaper than standard Space Marines. Just 5 of these with Savage Fury active and some rerolls from their characters can one round quite a lot of seriously threatening enemy units. If they get full rerolls from the Chapter Master or the Chaplain, you can reroll everything that isn't a 6 and fish for an absolute ton of exploding 6s. There's also +1 to wound if it's really necessary for another couple of CP. They can aim to start out of line of sight, jump up the board while remaining so, but even just in light or dense cover, they're really tough to shift with those Storm Shields. They've got really quite nasty counter threat range as well, with a big 6-inch heroic intervention threat for just 1 command point. Finally, for the main battle line, we have 2 units of 5 Longfangs, each with 3 cheap grav cannons, a multi-melter and an Armorium Cherub, all ready to strike from a drop pod. Longfangs have their very nice stratagem to ignore any penalties to hit on the move, which means one of the 2 units can be hitting on its standard 3s even after coming in out of deep strike. The grav cannons have some really long threat range, and the Armorium Cherub can double down on multi-melter shots if they're needed, and he can place the Signum on that model as well, for a very scary amount of anti-tank and anti-infantry all coming out of reserve. They might well be able to drop into character reroll range as an added bonus. Finally, and perhaps the element of the list that I was most impressed with, were the 3 supporting characters, all of which can have multiple roles as they bound up the board. First up is a jump pack Chapter Master armed with twin Frost Claws and having the Imperium Sword Warlord trait. With a bunch of Strength 5 damage 2 attacks that reroll the wound roll, he's going to make a mess of most things, particularly elite infantry. He carries the helpful reroll 1s for the Dreadnoughts. The Longfangs might be able to drop into that reroll 1s aura, and he can soup up 1 unit with full rerolls each turn, maybe the Volkite Contemptor turn 1, maybe a unit of Wolf Guard when they can actually get a charge off. Of course he can always just use it on himself if he doesn't have anything else to buff and he really wants to go into maximum blender mode. Next up we have a Librarian also with a jump pack. He takes Murderous Hurricane. It can deny Overwatch, but more importantly it can make the enemy unit fight last. So if you are charging multiple targets across the board, then your day isn't going to get ruined by a cheeky interrupt. He also has Stormcaller as well, a 6-inch aura of light cover, and if you are playing against a powerful shooting army, you can spend extra command points to make that into a 6-inch aura of -1 to hit as well. I was just very impressed with how well this worked in synergy with the characters jumping up the board. The drop pod devs dropped into their aura, they chained forward to have range on my models and chained back so they'd be in range of the character buffs, and then not only were they hitting far harder than they normally would be able to, but they also had light cover and -1 to hit next turn, making them significantly harder to remove. Most of them still wound up dying to return fire, but it meant that I didn't have firepower to dedicate to other things. As well as that, he also has the ever-present Rights of War Warlord trait for Obsec, and another very nasty source of fight last in the armour of Russ. Again, that's going to make it very hard to approach the Space Wolf battle line, if he has the option of heroic intervening into you. Finally, last but by no means least, we have a Primaris Chaplain on a bike. He's a Master of Sanctity with Wise Orator, and he's taken the +2 to charge from Canticle of Hate. That will certainly help deliver those Wolf Guard. And he also picks up the Catechism of Fire, that's the one for +1 to wound the closest unit when shooting, which again works very very nicely indeed on that Volkite Contemptor. If he can get shots off on something meaningful turn 1, then he could be re-rolling all hits, +1 to wound, re-rolling 1s to wound, and also have all those attacks at AP -1. That will quite likely be leaving a mark on pretty much anything in the game. And it's certainly not like he can't function as a melee buffing piece as well, as he can flex into an aura of full re-rolls to hit in close combat with a litany of hate that he gets as well. Finally, to round up the last few points, there's a single lone Cyberwolf, a random nuisance model to get in the way, or score or contest some cheeky objectives if needed. Overall, as you can probably tell, I really like the list, and it was pretty glorious seeing it take apart my army bit by bit. Thanks for a great game, and sorry for not putting up more opposition. Moving on to our second list though, I thought we'd look at a different flavour of Space Wolves, this one embracing the Space Wolves chap's tactic proper, and reaping the advantages of taking a bunch of their stronger special characters. This one's by Lee Wright, who used it to take second at the Glasshammer GT. Again, we do have a bit of a melee Dreadnoughts and characters theme, but the Dreadnoughts are quite a lot more combat orientated, and they're backed up by a hefty contingent of Primaris Marines. Perhaps one of the most interesting themes of the list are Dreadnoughts, and quite a decent variety here. We've got Bjorn the Fell-Handed with a multi-melter. He's just pretty efficient all round, a reroll aura, solid in melee, and poses some ranged threat as well. The brutal close combat Dreadnought that is Murderfang, perhaps for the points one of the most destructive Dreadnoughts in Warhammer 40k, a huge number of damage 3 attacks that reroll wound rolls with those Murder Claws. Tanking damage in front of them is a venerable Dreadnought with a Blizzard Shield and Vanrisian Great Axe, as vehicles go really quite rough to shift, and maybe a slightly more unusual choice in a Leviathan Dreadnought with dual storm cannons and heavy flamers. Dreadnoughts that we haven't seen quite so much of in top lists since the datasheet changed in 9th. Quite nice to see one in action though. I guess it makes a nice change from the Volkite Contemptors that seem to be everywhere. I believe that they'll be slogging forward, being protected by the sturdy units of Blade Guard. They should be able to deflect any anti-tank firepower without too much difficulty. Storm Shields plus Transhuman Physiology is a really nice combination, and they'll certainly enjoy Stormcaller with Niall to go up to an effective 1+ save. Those Blade Guard with a character support would certainly make you think twice about putting anything in charge range. There's then 3 units of troops to hold down objectives, 2 units of intercessors with auto-bolt rifles who could either hold the backfield or advance into the midfield if needed, and both squads have taken a power fist for a little bit more punchiness in melee. There's also 1 unit of infiltrators as well, holding down the midfield and also providing a nice bubble of no deep strike at all. In the centre of the blobs there's a fairly high value captain with a Thunderhammer, Storm Shield and Jump Pack. He also has Saga of the Hunter as well for advance and charge, and once he's made 1 successful charge, that will become a helpful aura for all the other slightly slower units. The captain also has Rights of War as well, so he can claim objectives himself, or allow the Blade Guard to do it with Obsec, and the truly excellent armour of Russ, so he doesn't have to be worried about being interrupted against. Then we have Niall Stormcaller, the premier and very reliable Space Wolf Psyker. Again, he takes Murderous Hurricane for a fight last ability, Stormcaller for the cover, and he also has Living Lightning if he needs to double down on mortal wounds. Finally, we have a couple of units to point and delete some threats, 5 Wolfguard with the Jump Packs, Lightning Claws and Storm Shields that we all know and love, and then a unit of 3 Eradicators with Melter Rifles, which could be strategic reserved if desired, to give a very hefty melter punch to the target that needs it the most. Finally, with a few leftover points, there's a bunch of random Cyberwolves again, this time 3 units, 2 units of 1 and 1 unit of 2. Expendable threats can be used for screening, or maybe doing things like getting in table quarters or contesting objectives in a pinch. Really quite a fun list this one. I do like the amount of variety here. And as always, Space Wolves being Space Wolves, there aren't really a fat lot of units here that you can completely write off as a threat, particularly not once they get into Assault Doctrine. So, hope you enjoyed a couple of really nice Space Wolf lists. It was fun to take another look at the Sons of Russ. As always, feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly be keeping the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel quite a lot, I would just like to mention one way in which you can support the channel, which is my Element Games affiliate link, which you can find in the video description. If you were thinking about picking up some Space Wolves or any other 40k things, Element Games is a discount retailer based in the UK. They give between 10 and 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures, and if you buy anything after clicking the link in the video description, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics without costing you any more whatsoever. Can just be a way to help out the channel if you were thinking about buying something anyway. I also do have an Amazon link as well for people in the USA and Canada. That one's also down there in the video description, and it works in much the same way. Click the link, buy whatever you were going to anyway. It can be Warhammer or anything else, and again a small amount goes to help support the channel. A massive thank you to you guys who have been using those, it does help out quite a bit. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.